Hello and good morning, Lucy. It's a pleasure to have you with us. I'm just going to present you and then ask you some questions on your wonderful career. Lucy Orta started out as a fashion designer and became an artist who now works in partnership and co-authorship with her husband, the Argentinian artist Jorge Orta. She has been professor at London College of Fashion since 2002 and is currently chair of Art and the Environment at the University of the Arts London, where she founded the Art for the Environment Artist in Residency program. Lucy has received many honors and awards and has completed an amazing number of works and projects relating to the subject of sustainability. For example, refuge wear, body architecture in the 90s, or nexus architecture, survival textile sculptures that are at the same time collective structures. Or Orta water, purified water from the Grand Canal in Venice, which was a project that was at the Bevilacqua Foundation in Venice a few years ago. Lucy has also created very poetic, large-scale works, such as Symphony for Absent Wildlife and Antarctica, dedicated to nature and the environment. So, Lucy, let's start with this very difficult, complicated term, sustainability, which is almost impossible to define, kind of dissipates into a vague cloud. When did you decide to devote your much of your art practice to this subject? And what do you think the arts and specifically the visual arts can play? What role can the arts play in bringing about a better, let's say, awareness of sustainability?
Yeah, good morning, Anna. I'll have to go back to a little bit earlier than actually Orta Water that you mentioned and talk a little bit about the collaboration between me and Jorge, because our work has been drawing from societal issues ever since the beginning, since we started working together in 1992. So we've developed this methodology to work together, to research and to develop artworks, projects over a long-term period. So Orta Water, our project around Orta Water, our project around water distribution, and the resource developed out of this methodology that we developed, and we started dedicating a collaborative practice in 2005 specifically to environmental issues, thanks to an invitation by the Bevilacqua Foundation in Venice that you mentioned, for an exhibition that was going to take place during the Venice Biennale. So this is in 2005. So water became one of our major themes to investigate. And we used to say that our projects would last 10 years long, and it would allow us enough time to develop the methods, to test those, in exhibition format, so to make the artworks, to present them to audiences, to get feedback, and also to collaborate, and then also analyze if our kind of process has been effective in empowering people or changing attitudes in some way, or allowing people to understand more about the issues at stake. So 10 years we used to say, but it's now been a lot longer. So 2005 Orta Water, we're still working on it today. And what I'd like to say,
amazing. So long-term projects are really part of your curriculum. I mean, that's the way you work, basically. That's quite unusual.
Yeah, I think you mentioned, I mean, the big word sustainability, but even, let's say, before that, I mean, we talk about sustainability in terms of the resources and the environment, but sustainability for us is also about building community bonds and resilience. And so a project that actually precedes Orta Water that maybe doesn't get so much focus because it's about community is the 70 by 7, the meal project. I mean, we won't go into that today, but it's about bringing communities together. And I think those are important aspects of our practice, is both the environmental and the climate emergency, and then also the bringing of people into discussion, into discursive formats, and building those community bonds.
Which has been very penalized in the last year with the COVID, and we'll talk about that later. Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the really poetic works, which has been recent work, is Absent Wildlife, which is so moving, both as a symphony, but it's much more than a symphony or a performance. And it's also a very complex work that you decided to do initially in Canada. Can you tell me about that, and tell me also about how you somehow managed to move these works around the globe and make them incredibly interesting and relevant for other communities and other places in the world?
Yes, so as you say, the Symphony for Absent Wildlife began its life, let's say, in Canada, thanks to a commission. But it also stems from another longer term research project, as I just mentioned, this process of working on a long period of time on a particular issue. And this research project is Genius Loci. So it's working very closely in locations to draw out the spirits of the place, the meaning. I guess this was related to placemaking. And spending a lot of time in the location. So the commission in Canada, actually in Calgary, invited me to spend quite a bit of time in the Alberta region. And then I was also very lucky to be invited to run a program at the Banff Centre in Canada in the Rocky Mountains, so a 3 hours drive from the city of Calgary. So between those two locations, I was able to spend a lot of time immersing myself in the landscape, of course, and meeting people. And the commission was associated with the Alberta College of Art, and with a very interesting faculty. And I was able to meet students and discuss current issues in Canada. And the commission was to create a performance, a live performance for the Nuit Blanche. So there were some parameters there that we had to respect. And because I was working on Genius Loci at the time, I was saying, well, what are the spirits? Who are the characters? Who are who are they? What are the spirits that are going to embody this idea of the region, of the Alberta, of the town and the city, and because spending a lot of time in the museums and researching and meeting elders and talking to the students, the idea of the spirits of the forest in terms of those that are linked to the indigenous cultures became a way of creating characters, and these characters become the species that are disappearing or have disappeared because of species loss, because of extinction in the region of Northern Alberta region, Canada. And felt was the material that I used to craft, to fabricate these animals. The animals actually take the form of the masks. So the creatures are the masks of animals that are threatened or extinct. And felt became an important material because it was also linked to this notion of the democratization of dress, and linked to exchange between the early European settlers and invaders and the First Nations people. Felt was manufactured in Europe, in England, actually in the north of England, the wool, and traded with the beaver pelts in Canada. And Calgary was an important location for this activity to take place. And of course, there was the fort, one of the first forts to be built in Calgary. So all of these elements, political, social, cultural, environmental, kind of weave into this work. And then it takes the form of an orchestra of masked animals, of masked creatures that are playing very tiny little wooden bird whistles. And there's another story about the bird whistles I can weave in, but we maybe don't have too much time. But these bird whistles are, you know, almost like mini little sculptures, and they replicate the sounds of nature. And so I asked the orchestra to create a symphony using these bird whistles, and the symphony will build up in a crescendo, and then there's a very deathly moment at the end of it, deathly silence, so a moment at the end of it which is very emotional, because we cut out all of this beautiful sound and the bird song, the dawn chorus, which comes to an end abruptly. I guess, yeah, the idea was to evoke this disappearance, but do it in a way where it was a shock and would affect people. And actually, during the performance in Calgary, the live performance, people burst into tears. It was absolutely incredible, the response to it. And then it took me 6 years to finally bring this together in a film format, which is actually on exhibition in a large projection film format in the EDF Foundation, in a beautiful exhibition called Green Currents, curated by Paul Arden. So thanks to the commission by the EDF Foundation, I was finally able to complete the cycle of this performance taking place and record the actual orchestra playing the bird whistles, and combine those together with footage that I filmed not only in Calgary, but also in the Banff forest. As I mentioned, these are the creatures of the forest, the spirits of the forest that are in danger of disappearing. And then as this was going on, this 6-year cycle of performances and recordings, they actually introduced bison into the forest in Banff while we were there. So it was really beautiful. Wow. It was this project was, heralding the rewilding of the forests in Alberta in the Banff National Park. Wow. So a very emotional project to work on. And yeah, the film was the culmination of that all of this thinking.
Well, it's incredibly poetic, and it also, what impresses me is that it mingles so many things, the indigenous respect for the indigenous people and from their point of view, disappeared species, the whole felt trade, and therefore colonization, decolonization, all these issues, but not with a polemical, controversial, to it, but a really poetic and constructive vision. So I think that is really one of its really most interesting parts of this complex project. Another project, which is a recent project, is Antarctica, which is more in the line of almost creating an institution, which is almost a state institution, which is something that other artists too have been doing recently. In what way is your project on Antarctica, again, still linked to the environment? And how did you think of it? How did you plan it as a project?
Yeah, here we have to credit Jorge for his vision, because in 1995, he was invited to present a work at the Venice Biennale to represent Argentina. Mm-hmm. And at the time, Argentina didn't have a pavilion. So the only work that he could do would be ephemeral. And he used this opportunity also to write a manifesto. This is 1995, and the manifesto was a vision for the future, which would be bringing communities together to address complex problems in society. And he used the metaphor, or the metaphor, I would say, of Antarctica, but not necessarily, not just a metaphor. He used the Antarctic Treaty, the metaphor of Antarctica being this virgin territory, if you like, this continent yet to be, the continent that doesn't belong to anybody, but he actually based it on the Antarctic Treaty, which is the first peace treaty to be signed after the Cold War in '59, which now brings over 50 nations together with common goals to protect the environment, to work collaboratively for scientific means. And it's a continent where all arms are banished. So as an ideal, as a continent where people are coming together already to work cooperatively and to protect the environment, it was an important goal to work towards. Antarctica exists, so isn't it possible for us to create something together? And so the passport grew out of this project that he presented at the Venice Biennale in '95. And the idea, our dream was to go to Antarctica and to set the foundations for the village, for the community, which we were able to do in 2007. So another one of these very long-term projects. This is related to the very extreme difficulties of being able to go to the continent, to be able to go to Antarctica. And fortunately, we were invited by the End of the World Biennale to be able to do that, and supported by the logistical scientists and the base in Antarctica to actually found the community. So that was really important. This was a symbolic act of placing our dwellings, the dome dwellings, on the continent, and then raising the flag. So we have all of these elements now of a community coming together. And then a year later, thanks to the exhibition at the Hangar Bicocca in Milan, curated by Bartolomeo Petromachi, we were able to actually create the first passport. And we didn't realize at that time that it was going to become such an important project. We created a first edition of 10,000 passports and signed people up, writing their names and numbers in a little booklet. And then as the years went by and the development of internet and databases and Facebook, we could see that actually that was the crux of the project, the heart of it. This community could actually come together thanks to the passport, which is what's happening today. We've printed over 72,000 passports now, Anna. It's incredible.
I'm a proud possessor of a passport. So.
And online, unfortunately, of course, these online applications were developed much later on, but I worked with MIT to actually set this up. Must have been about 2005, so in the early days of Facebook, and so we have about 35,000 people online, which is absolutely tremendous.
And that community is still alive. You managed to keep it alive with communication, or is somebody helping you pick that up as a movement?
We pick it up. Yeah, no, it's an interesting question because it's in. We pick it up when we have invitations, because we're running so many projects parallel. And ideally, I think where we'd like this to take, the community should become its own entity, but it's not possible at the moment. We don't have the tools or the knowledge or the
almost technology independent of you, but at the same time maybe with an idea of it going where you want it to go.
Yeah,
that is.
Yeah, we're actually waiting for an exhibition to open. It was due to open in 2020, but in 2021 we'll be part of Diversity United, and it's an exhibition that we'll be touring to Russia and Germany and France.
Where does it originate, this Diversity United?
In Bonn, in Germany.
Okay.
The Stiftung Kunstinstitut in Bonn.
That's interesting.
So we have a new edition coming out any day soon.
And it's not a gallery, it's an institute?
A cultural organization, yes.
Which is interesting too.
Yeah, it's just the cultural organization is bringing together 90 artists from across Europe to talk about issues of nationality and identity. So a really important exhibition.
Well, this brings me to my next question, which is about your role as an educator, because you have an important part of your work is at the London University of the Arts, where you're Professor of Art and the Environment, and where you teach these issues also to artists. So how do you integrate this approach to the work of artists? Because it's not just a education on sustainability, but you're working with artists, and you invented this Artist in Residence program. So it would be interesting how you approach this with young artists.
Yeah, so the residency program is something that I set up in 2015. And it was it was an opportunity for the students to be able to interact with the environment in different ways. So, and it's articulated around a number of hosts that we have. So this possibility to interact could take place within the forests of Amazonia. We have a host residency in Brazil, it's called Lab Verde, or in Africa, and this is with Thread, the Albers and Nanny and Joseph Albers Foundation in Senegal, and in Almeria in Spain, in Italy, and also in the UK locally. So these different opportunities provide a very interesting setup for our students to engage with these issues and to interact with their hosts and develop projects. So it's a research period that we're offering them to be able to develop their thinking. And also, just I mentioned Banff Centre earlier on. We have a student also that has an opportunity to go to the Banff Centre. And with this program, there are three areas, three scenarios that I'm interested in. Is this profound connection that humans can establish with nature. So that's one of them. And the other one is the emotion of observation, so observing things, and then the social exchange that takes place in these residencies. So those are the three pillars that drive the thinking behind it. And we have around 20 different hosts now. So this is an annual program that is taking place. Unfortunately, it was paused because of COVID, but we're hoping that the students will go there next year. And then that's one thing, that's a program that I've set up, and I have colleagues working with me on that at the University of the Arts London. And the other is to intervene in the curriculum. I'm a research and an academic at the university. And so we intervene in different areas in the curriculum. And one of the projects that I've been working on is Traces Stories of Migration. And this brings local community together with the students to discuss stories of migration, either personal or family members. And from these discussions to develop artworks, artifacts, curated exhibitions. We have the MSc psychology students working with us as well. So a whole range of disciplines of students working around this project to draw, as I mentioned, to build these bonds, these community bonds, but also to create artworks, artifacts, outcomes from these encounters. And remarkably, we've been able to continue working on this project during lockdown by recording stories and sharing them online, and visualizing the process through sketchbooks that have been photographed and presented online. It's been absolutely remarkable, and really very emotional, this project, because it's allowed different members of the community connect with their families in new ways and learn about their history and the history of their family. It's been absolutely wonderful. It's been incredible.
Must be an eye-opener for a lot of people who listen to these stories or who see them for the first time, because a lot of realities are beyond our imagination. I think that is incredible, how things have been able to continue despite COVID, some things at least. This brings me to ask you about post-COVID or COVID. How have your priorities changed, if they have changed with COVID, with this current pandemic, and what has it made you aware of, and how do you think your practice might change after this sort of pandemic, this worldwide experience? One of the things that I was thinking about is, for example, the healing environment. How important the healing environment, and many of your projects seem to me very close to this concept of nature as a healing environment. And so I'm just wondering how this has affected your work.
Yeah, in a sense, I mean, Jorge and I have been talking about this a lot, and the pandemic is a culmination of all kinds of things that we've been building up to. So I think that, we've been working not towards the pandemic, obviously, but towards crisis in the world in general. So in terms of that, hasn't shifted our practice in any way, because we've always been dealing with the issues that are important to society. I think what we will be wanting to do post-pandemic, of course, is to re-knit the social bonds, those that we haven't been able to interact during this. It'll be 2 years, I'm sure, by the time we get out of this. So that will become a priority. And then the other priority, of course, will be the climate emergency that will be, obviously focusing on a lot more. And also, then that's linked to the Amazonia project, species loss. So in terms of our routine, nothing has strictly changed. We're working a little bit differently in terms of the mediums we're using, because we don't have access to all of the materials that we had in the past. But we're continuing very much in the same way. Fortunately, we have, as artists, and I think this is the same for artists, large studios that we can work to. We have studios, but we also have very large studios that we can go to, so we can move between our different locations. At the moment, we're lockdown almost, I mean, like pre-lockdown in Paris with a curfew at 6 p.m. But we're always in Paris in the wintertime, and it's a period that we hibernate, and we use this as a very meditative period to develop artworks for the future. So it hasn't changed our routine in that sense. What did change was the March was the outbreak of the pandemic, and I started a new project specifically on masking and masks as a way to overcome anxiety and to think about how we can use this to, in a positive way, to overcome the fear of the pandemic. So this will be a project that I'm going to be working on over the next year, actually, with students at the University of the Arts London. Mask making will become one of the projects with various different methodologies that I'm developing. So yeah, I guess it's a small interstice in something much larger that we're doing. Yeah.
But it's interesting. I'm playing with masks from various cultures or countries, and see what they actually express in the way of fear, maybe, or that sort of thing.
Absolutely, yes, yeah, yeah, definitely.
Well, that is really exciting. I think that your work is really important, especially at this time. And the fact that you have not changed your direction is a confirmation of the fact that you are going in a direction which is something that, a direction which people are beginning to realize is so important, and many of the issues have been underestimated or not thought out enough. So thank you, Lucy. Thank you very much for your work above all, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Anna.
In Italian you say buon lavoro. So
grazie.
Keep going in this direction, and I hope to have the opportunity of seeing you again soon and talking to you again soon.
Social bond.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank
Bye-bye.